In Stillwater, Minnesota, Amy Maratz launched a full-time homeschooling collaborative called Awakening Spirit in 2017 to serve the distinct needs of gifted and neurodiverse learners. After earning an education degree and teaching at a Minneapolis charter school early in her career, Amy began homeschooling her own children and saw a need for a dedicated program to address neurodiversity within a holistic, nurturing environment. She now runs Awakening Spirit from her home with about a dozen learners and is helping other aspiring founders to create their own microschools, homeschooling collaboratives, and similar learning models. Amy Maratz, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is one of my pleasures is to listen to all of the different school founders that you've been able to interview over the past year. Have you this
Couple
been going on
years.
for a
Yeah.
couple years? Yeah. So I am very excited to add my voice to that collection.
Well, I'm very excited to hear your voice and to have you here. I loved being able to visit Awakening Spirit in person recently when I was visiting founders in the Minneapolis area, many of whom are part of the VELA Founder Network, including you, who have been supported by the VELA Education Fund and are part of their entrepreneur ecosystem. So it was great to see this beautiful space you've created and hear about your journey. And I'm thrilled for others to hear more about it now, too. So let's start, Amy, with the backstory of how you got into education to begin with. You had an education degree and were a classroom teacher before shifting over to unconventional education. Tell us a little bit about what made you decide to go into the education profession and specifically go into conventional classrooms earlier in your career.
Absolutely. Well, I kind of came about the whole education thing a little bit unorthodoxly, which is par for the course for my life's work. But my degree, I thought I was going to be going to graphic design, and my degree was studio art. And I threw English in there because I love English, and I thought, okay, this will be a really good way to get my writing skills up for marketing. And I graduated in 2002 from St. Olaf College, and there were like crickets out there in the job field for graphic design at that point in time. It was kind of right at the little slump where a lot of college grads were having a hard time finding work. Um, my mom is a reading specialist in West Des Moines, Iowa, and has been a teacher for years and years, and has always pushed her children to go into education. And we always pushed back, saying, "No, no, no, we want to do our own thing." Well, it turns out that my own thing is exactly education. So I went um, I went back to school and I got my master's from Bethel University. And what was neat about that program was I was able to, have my full-time job, which, was a really exciting a job in a mortgage company at that point in time to pay the bills. But I went to school at night then to get my master's. And that gave me the opportunity to come about my thinking a little differently. I was way into the research on single sex classrooms and the benefits of that. And so when I graduated and had my thesis written, that really helped me get my first job at Minneapolis Academy, which was the charter school, because it was something unconventional. And they actually decided to take that idea and have single sex classrooms, not because it was my idea. That was what they were doing. I was just really in line with the vision of that founder as well. So helping found as a founding teacher, a charter school was a really, really interesting way for me to kind of take a look behind the scenes and know all of the parts and pieces that went into starting a school more like a business than a school. The founder was worried about enrollment, everything that we work through with our micro school founders today, enrollment, marketing, how do we find these parents? How do we make sure that our message is clear? And then how do you build a classroom? I got to build my first classroom, extremely lucky. But I got to order everything that I wanted off the list because he was going into a church, and we got to decide everything that we wanted. So that was my first experience building a classroom. And it kind of showed me that when I was ready to start my own school, it's something that's very, very doable. You just need to keep putting one foot in front of the next.
Just amazing that you've sort of been at the forefront of education innovation for a while, sort of starting with the charter sector. And of course, charter schools, when they first came on the scene in the 1990s, were hailed as incubators for education innovation. They were really going to provide these experimental laboratories for all kinds of different models for education. And sadly, that largely hasn't happened. I think in the charter sector, in many cases, charters became more heavily regulated, more standardized, even more test driven in some cases than traditional district schools. What was your experience like at that charter school? Was it as innovative and experimental as you had hoped? Were they able to sort of retain that vision for
So
innovation?
that's a great question. And yeah, the bureaucracy and the red tape and everything that surrounds the money that follows the students from location to location is onerous. Um, when I was there, we were able to be really creative. We were able to use a lot of we used core knowledge curriculum, so it was more of a curriculum, but we were modeled after the KIP schools, the knowledge is power schools that have gotten a lot of publicity. um, and so I was only there for 3 years because then it came time to raise my own family. And I took a step back. But while I was there, we had the director, the administration was extremely supportive of his teachers. And he basically said, I'm going to do all of the back office stuff. I'm going to run, I'm going to meet the fundraising committee. I'm going to do all of this. You guys just teach. And so he hired who he thought were the best, most qualified, not only teachers, but kind of subject matter experts. So for me, that was art and literature. And he's like, this is what lights you up. I want you to teach that. And so we had a lot of I wrote my own curriculum. I've never used a box curriculum in my entire life. And I just kind of pick and choose and curate. And that was a really nice way to get my feet wet in doing that. But yeah,
Amazing. So
I mean,
then,
it's all about the testing, right? So it all comes
mm,
down to the testing at the end of the year. Um, and so we were able to show that our scores were equal or better than the public schools in the district, and that was great for the beginning of that school.
so then you said a few years into that, you left to raise your own family. Tell us a little bit about moving from that kind of conventional classroom at the charter school to what was next for you.
Sure. What was next for me was motherhood. So I had my daughter in 2007, and just knew that I wanted to be a very conscientious parent. My husband and I both talked about every single decision that we were going to make for parenting the life of these children. And we decided that we were lucky enough. He had a good full-time job. I was able to stay home and just be her educator at home. But that was the role that I took on. It wasn't just I'm momming. It was, nope, this is my job, is to prepare this young person to function in a changing world. And so that was just kind of the outlook that we took from then on. I love classes and I love learning. And so we were in the kinder music programs. We were doing baby sign language classes for me. We were doing the Little Gym I don't know if they're still around, a franchise that was wonderful for early childhood movement type of things. And then Minnesota is very lucky. We have a wonderful state funded early childhood and family education program that's not only open to people from a certain socioeconomic background. Like normally it's for maybe people who are poor or need extra support. The Minnesota one is open to everybody, and it has a sliding pay scale, which is one thing that I took away from that when it came time to start my own school too, was how do I make this accessible to everybody who needs it? So that was one of the things that fed into that. So yeah, through the early childhood program, through the local Waldorf school that we did classes through, I just kind of took bits and pieces that I thought were beautiful and effective in nurturing creative potential in children, in teaching that creative reasoning, because in my opinion, creativity is the #1 predictor of future success. There's nothing else.
So then what happened next? How did you go from these individual classes and maybe beginning to connect with the homeschooling community in Minnesota to then deciding to become an education entrepreneur?
Sure. Well, when it came time for my daughter to have to go to first grade, we were right across the street. She wouldn't even had to cross a actual street to go to a public school. And my husband and I both went on their open house night, separate times because the little ones were sleeping. So we went back and forth, and we both came back and we said, I don't think that's an environment that we are going to want our daughter in. She had been she's in the Waldorf program, so she was very sheltered as far as screen time and even even the toys selection. We tried to keep everything very natural and wooden and calm. Um, and I walked into the public school, and it's a beautiful public school. They have lots of money, but I heard locker doors slamming here and there, and I'm I couldn't settle my own nervous response system down enough to be able to listen to this teacher. And then I asked the teacher, the #1 thing was, okay, well, how much outside time do they get? And she said, oh, for first grade, they get 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. As if that was something that was supposed to be like super impressive. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. I went back and I said, you know what, Dave, this doesn't feel right. Um, the drive to the Waldorf school was too long, though. I had a little baby who I felt guilty putting in a car seat. And then I sat there and I said, you know what, I do have my master's in education. How much can I mess up first grade? And that was kind of the starting conversation for the homeschooling. So we homeschooled. And again, I jumped in 2 feet forward. We love adventuring. We love field trips. And I was doing this with my own child and posting about it. And I had other parents who I met who would say things like, oh, have you ever thought about, like, do you think you'd homeschool my kid? And I'd always say, no, 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 no. And then I met a family where um, mom was a full-time entrepreneur. She was a physical trainer and a nutritionist, and her daughter was begging her to homeschool her. And she just didn't have it in her wheelhouse. She didn't have the time. She, knew her like science stuff really well, but she didn't know anything else. And so we talked, and I thought if there was ever a kiddo who deserved a fair chance, it was this little Talon, and she is the same age as my daughter. And so we started down the road of doing the homeschool cooperative. And as people saw what we did and the programming that we were doing, we just had more and more interest. Um, and it just kind of grew slowly. It's a slow
Mm.
burn. So we went from the first year I filed as a school was 2017, and we had 3 students, and then we had 4 students, and then we had 7 students, and then we had 9 students, and then we moved out to this other location, just so that we had more room and we could be, when we started, we were in the suburbs, but we couldn't just walk out the door and be in the forest. And now that's a huge part of our programming and our curriculum is forest school time. And we have immediate access to that, which was really important.
So tell us a little bit about the regulatory landscape, Amy. Are you a state recognized private school? I know there's also many micro schools that run as more like tutoring centers or enrichment centers for homeschoolers, although they often look like private schools. Because what was it like for you? And what are sort of some of the options there in Minnesota around the
Sure.
regulatory framework. Yeah.
Minnesota makes it really easy to have a micro school, which is fantastic. So in Minnesota, any school that is a non-public school, which includes just a single family homeschooling, you register as a non-public school in the state of Minnesota. Now, when I was registered as a private school, I've done a couple different things because, as people who are listening will know, you have to be able to think creatively around some of these law logistics. So when I lived in the first city, Woodbury, I could register as a private school. And I went, you check your education code. And in Minnesota, the education code requires that you provide or collect um, like immunization records or the compliance things that go with that, and you do standardized testing at the end of the year. Now, they don't require you turn in the standardized testing. They just require that it's done so that if you get audited as a homeschooling or non-public schooling school, you have all of that data to give them. And then you're supposed to keep a portfolio of some sort with proof of the work during the year. So there's really only three like requirements for Minnesota, which makes it really nice. But what people have to remember is that it's not only about the education code, you have to also go to your city and make sure that you're in compliance with the city zoning. In Woodbury, they considered me, they didn't have micro schools, weren't even in the vernacular at that point in time. So they considered us an in-home daycare, and we just made sure we met the fire code for the in-home daycare and all of the other things, but they did not make me register as a daycare. So I'm registered as an educational resource in the state of Minnesota. And all of our families file as non-public schools as homeschoolers. So that's how we operate. Now, if you went to a different city, for example, we were looking at a property to buy before we bought this place that was in a town called Lake Elmo. And they had nothing on their books of micro schools. And so you go to the city council and you say, how do we make this happen? And they say, oh, we're not going to do that. And so then you say, okay, who do I need to talk to? Because this is going to happen in a polite and nice way. And then they hem and haw, and they finally give you to the county commissioner. And then you go talk to, or the city planning committee. So then you go talk to the city planning committee and you say, okay, hypothetically, if I was to do this, what would I need? And they can go through all of the requirements. So we use the county standards as far as they consider us a home ec classroom for our kitchens, because our kids actually prepare all of the food. So I don't have to go through any of the commercial kitchen requirements. So that's for that. Septic, they just made sure that we had a big enough septic system to handle all of the people. We don't have a whole lot of people, so that wasn't a big deal. But going through and making sure that you can check off all of those check boxes so that you are in compliance, or at least you know the name of the person who you talked to on the phone and said, oh, Bob S. told me that this was completely fine and I got this checked off on November 22nd. Just keeping all of those things up to date, because the worst thing to happen to your school is for it to be shut down for something silly that you haven't thought about. We have a lawyer who has gone through all of our documents, and again, there is no micro school type of thing that we can look at, but his advice was, as long as you're adhering to the intent of the law and the letter of the law, which is, to maintain a safe environment for kids to be, then it all should just kind of play out from there.
Just such great advice too, Amy, that prospective founders should be aware of both state and local requirements, not only in education, but in terms of business operations, and how at the local level, there can be such wide discrepancies between, different towns or different counties around what they expect. Interesting that you said sort of at one of the towns that you looked at, a property, their first response to you was, no, we don't do that here. Which
Yeah.
is, again, it just sort of speaks to the roadblocks that education entrepreneurs encounter, that entrepreneurs in other sectors, certainly not easy for any entrepreneur, but they may not have that same level um, of obstacle that education entrepreneurs have, right? If someone wanted to open an insurance company in that town, my guess is it probably would have been more straightforward and they might not have gotten no's. But because you wanted to create something different and interesting and outside of the box, it was a harder sell. And then your point of just don't take no for an answer, right? Just keep moving along
Yeah,
under the expectation that you're going to open your program and let's find a way to make this happen.
exactly. Because when you boil it down to everybody wants kids to do well. Nobody's saying no because they hate kids. They're saying no because they don't understand what it is that you want to do, or it's going to be a lot of work to change the laws. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of this and this and this. That's why you're getting the no's. You're not getting the no's because people don't want kids to have an awesome education.
So maybe give them an opportunity to say yes, right? And help work
Right.
with them
Yeah.
to do that in a way that makes sense. So, okay, so you opened your program in 2017. Now you're in this new gorgeous location that's deeply connected to nature. Tell us a little bit about what Awakening Spirit is like today in terms of the curriculum, the educational philosophy, and the students that you're serving.
Yeah, so Awakening Spirit Homeschool Collaborative helps families with gifted and highly sensitive kids. So when you mentioned neurodiverse, there's a lot of kids who have, the 2E. Um, and we help them joyously adventure and learn in a nurturing and supportive environment. So the school is located in our family home, and we have dedicated classroom spaces as well as kind of shared spaces where you can relax and explore different types of. We have a chess table set up and the kids are there playing chess. We have a meditation area in the living room. So we try to really cater to that creative child, the child who, because they're gifted, and we don't require them any proof of giftedness, um, but because they're gifted, they have been either underserved or just kind of swept aside in the mainstream classroom or just given like accelerated worksheets. Being gifted isn't just about doing work. It's about having the time and the space to be able to deeply delve into your passions and your interests and really get in there and understand it. So we have farm animals, we have goats and rabbits and guinea pigs, and a big part of the kids' day is actually working on the land with the animals, coming in, having responsibilities that they're in charge of, and taking care of the school itself. So we reset at the end of every day with our chores, and everyone has a sense of ownership in it. We, like I said, I've never used a box curriculum in my life. But we do use teaching textbooks is what most of our students use for math, although we have families who are using something else and send their kids with this program, and that's not a problem. We try to be really individualized as far as our lessons go. But the kids do have half an hour of seated math time, half an hour of kind of an English language adaptive curriculum that goes all the way from teaching phonics and fluency to SAT prep. And that's kind of like the core. They really have to be on independently, individualized for that, because math and reading, without those two things, it's really hard to delve into your passion and explore more if you can't have those two. But after that's done, we do have a big portion of the day that the kids love called passion project time, and that's our self-directed learning. So that's a little more like kind of a loose Sudbury model, perhaps, where the kids come up with their own ideas and they're trying different things, and sometimes it's gamified and play-based, and sometimes they are building an aluminum foundry in the backyard. It's our job as guides to just be here to help them curate the materials they need and not necessarily answer questions. We're not completely Socratic in that I answer kids' questions, but we let them try to struggle with it a little bit first, because that's a huge part of um, my personal belief too, is that we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's really important to know that you're not going to know the answer all of the time. Sometimes it takes a while to get there.
What is drawing parents to your program?
Before the pandemic, it was parents who wanted to homeschool but couldn't because they had two full-time jobs or one full-time job, or they were a single parent and there just wasn't that. So that was in the beginning, and then the pandemic happened, and um, a lot of families were drawn to us who needed the community that was so kind of stripped from our society. We functioned as a pandemic pod. We met all throughout the pandemic. Our kids who are highly sensitive can't tolerate the feeling of a mask. And so this was a mask-free zone when we were inside our own school. We do field trips, and so we abide by the rules of the spot that we went to for that. But most parents really sometimes they would opt even out of going on those field trips and have extra things back here, just so that we had our own little enclave. And now it's parents who love homeschooling. They love being with their kids, but their kids are either getting a little bit older and it's harder to have all of the stuff. So like our resin 3D printer and our regular 3D printer, and we have sewing machines and all kinds of things, that the resources that kids can come here and kind of explore and learn from. Or the animals, having all of the animals, when at home it might be like, nope, we're just we're a bearded dragon family or whatever. That's a big thing. I think they're just looking to make their children happy, and not to make them happy, but to give them an environment where they can truly just be joy filled. Not a happy moment fleeting here and there when you get extra chocolate milk at lunch, but a moment where the kids are up in the morning ready to come to school. Kids who exhibited refusal before have gotten angry at their parents because their parents let them sleep in and they missed taking care of their goats, or whatever job it was that day. We have so many stories from so many families about kids who are like, oh, it's Saturday, we don't get to go to school today. So it's a lot of things, but it's a joy-filled, safe place to learn.
I love that. And I feel, and I'm curious if you feel this way too, that there is greater parental awareness that education can and should be joy-filled, right? That learning should be a wonderful experience, that kids should love to go to whatever school or space nurtures their creativity and their educational attainment, and that this should be something that's sought after by children and not looking to be avoided. So I'm curious if you see that too, that parents recognize that learning and teaching can be different.
I do. The parents who have jumped and have stepped forward, they're the parents who they all love their jobs too. They're all passionate about what it is they do. And so there's a disconnect when you say, oh my gosh, I love building bridges. Like I have a family whose mom works for the DOT and she's a bridge engineer and she loves her job so much. So why would you send your child somewhere where they didn't enjoy themselves as much as you enjoy yourself when you go to work?
Yeah.
That's a big part of our community, and these parents are always learning. Somebody's going for a certification here or there, and we have a wide variety. We have people who have the blue collar jobs where they're electricians and plumbers, and they're constantly learning the newest thing. We have educators who send their kids here. We have chiropractors and doctors and medical professionals, and then a lot of holistic professionals too. So even though we kind of spread the gamut, and even politically, we kind of spread across the spectrum, but we can all agree that love, compassion, grace are the three most important things that we want our kids to have every day and to learn how to give every day.
I love that. And so you're truly a one-room schoolhouse, that it's a mixed age environment, although older students might be working on projects that are, distinguished from younger students. Are students coming every day? What are your enrollment options?
So we do school 4 days a week. We take Wednesdays off, which is really nice because it gives kids, 2 days on and then that break day and then 2 days on and then a weekend. And we have options where you can come for 2 days or you can come for all 4 days. And we have the majority of kids come 4 days, but we have maybe four slots, 2 slots that are being shared right now by families who come 2 days, 2 days. And yeah, depending on how they're coming to us, whether they've been homeschooling for a while and they don't want to lose that at home time. Having that Wednesday at home is a great way to like keep that in, but then it's the flexibility of saying, we have 0 attendance requirements. If our parents are the first teachers and they know their kids best and they're going to make the best decisions that they can at any given point in time for that child. So we trust that 110%. And go take a vacation. Do you want work? Do you not want work? You let me know, because they're learning more on that vacation than they could be anywhere else.
Just that freedom and flexibility that we see in these innovative education models is so crucial. And I imagine that your learners are getting more than 15 minutes of outside time in the morning and 15 minutes of outside time in the afternoon. How often are they really integrated into nature?
Depending on the day, I would just say for an average day, they're outside around 2 hours. They have the morning time where they're doing chores. We have morning break where we call it outside projects and playtime. And that's where we're rebuilding the trail system. They're working together to move logs. And it's not just free labor for me, it's getting the whole body of the child involved and your brain connections working when you're rolling logs up and down a hill. Sometimes I have them do things that I don't really need done just so they can be doing that full body work. But they're out doing that. And then they have, a beautiful lunch time that's free play outside. And then the end of the day as well, if they want to go outside to do passion projects. So they have, I'd say 2 hours is a good average, but some kids spend half the day outside.
I love that. So you've decided that you'd like to maintain your micro feel of your program, especially where it's in your home and you want it to be manageable. You do run summer camp programs that are open not only to your current students in your academic year program, but also to new students who might have some more flexibility in the summer. But one of the things you're really focused on is helping other founders to launch their own programs in their own communities. Again, you're satisfied with the size that you're at now, but you want to see this overall movement grow towards more individualized, innovative education. Tell us a little bit about what that's like.
Yeah, I think that's the way forward, is all of these little grassroots schools that start up with involved either parents or teachers who are in the community. It's all about localizing it, and making sure everybody has an invested interest in keeping it going. When you franchise, people have done it and done it successfully, but for me, looking at franchising, it was just too much of a loss of actually knowing the people that I was going to be working with. And so I opted then to offer my coaching services separately. So you can come to me, you can take a tour of the school and sit down with me over a cup of tea and ask me your questions, and I can just rapid fire things at you left, right, or you can sign up for more of a long-term coaching commitment. I coached with a national organization called Micro School Builders for the past 5 years. And so I was their lead holistic education coach and probably helped 50 to 60 different schools get up and going, which is really exciting. And so I have a lot of experience, but it more than me telling people what to do, it's me sitting next to you guiding. That's just the way that I would do with my students. Okay, what is your city code? Let's go through and make sure that you have a grasp on this, and providing scaffolding, but providing lots of flexibility so that if you wanted to build a Lego focused school, I could help you with the basics of that. Even though my school is not Lego focused, I can still help people figure out where they need to be from a business perspective, because when we're starting these schools, we often have our teacher glasses on, which is perfect, right? Because we need to be designing them for the children and the families that we're serving. However, you need to be able to take those off and put business owner glasses on so that your school can remain viable. The worst thing that can happen, this is what I tell people all the time, is that you build this beautiful school and it's wonderful and everybody loves it, and then you have to shutter because your budget's not working. And then you have all these kids who had a taste of freedom and a taste of what it could be, who are then having to go somewhere else because the foundation wasn't strong enough. So that's super important, is building that strong business foundation on, knowing your budget, knowing your vision, and being crystal clear about your plan for the future.
I love that. So, Amy, if my listeners and viewers want to find out more about Awakening Spirit and the work you're doing there, or connect with you because they're looking to launch their own school or space in their community, how can they reach you?
So our website, www.awakeningspiritschool.com, has links to all of those things. I am going to be presenting a road schooling part, which we haven't talked about today, but we do a lot of extended field trips, road schooling, at the National Aero Conference this probably won't air before that, but in a few weeks. So I'm out there giving presentations and things like that as well.
It will be so great to see you in Minneapolis at the Alternative Education Resource Organization annual conference, talking about your work as an education entrepreneur and this sort of growing movement. So I'd love to just sort of wrap up, Amy, with hearing, your predictions, your sense of where is innovative education going.
Last week, I spent the week at the University of Georgia at the Mary Frances Early Education department, learning about the Torrance tests of creative thinking. And I was the only person there who was number one out of state and number two not part of a giant school district. Most of the other people there were sent by their school districts, and they were all working with gifted kids specifically. Because I spend so much time in the micro school arena, I forget that there's a lot of people who still don't even know what a micro school is. There's so much education that still needs to happen. And just the excitement that I saw on some of these women and men's faces when I was describing our program, they didn't even know that was possible. So I feel like it's a virtually untapped market and space for creative teachers who want to start their own programs, who, you're not going to make money hand over fist if you're doing it this way, but you'll be able to cover your bills. You can pay your mortgage with your student income if you're able to, and you can build something that is going to have a lasting legacy. So I see the movement continuing to grow. I think we're just seeing the very tip of the wave right now, and it's just going to keep going and going and going. And there'll be schools that make it, and there'll be schools that don't. And that's just the way that the market works. And if your school doesn't make it, it's because you needed to pivot on something. So pivot and start again.
Such great advice. And I'm sure many of those listening will take to heart what you have said and be inspired by your story. So, Amy Maratz, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you, Carrie.